In the heart of Europe, beneath skies heavy with ash and fear, there was a time when silence could kill you faster than sin. The year was 1486, the age when whispers became weapons and superstition ruled more fiercely than any king. They called it the cleansing, but those who lived through it called it something else, the season of smoke. It began in a small town called Dornheim, a quiet place of cobblestone streets and church bells. By day it was peaceful. By night, the wind carried screams. To the people, those screams were proof that evil was being purged. To the condemned, they were proof that hell had already come. Every morning, a new face was dragged to the square. A wife, a healer, a child, anyone who stood out, anyone too quiet, too smart, too different. The accusation was enough, which, that single word could undo an entire life. The flames didn't need truth, only witnesses. At the center of it all stood one man, Inquisitor Reinhardt. His black cloak flowed like a shadow that swallowed light. He wasn't born cruel, they said, but he found purpose in fear, and that purpose became his God. With every trial, his voice echoed to the town square like the toll of judgment itself. "Confess," he'd say, holding his rosary in one hand and the book of charges in the other. "Confess, and your soul may still be saved." Most confessed, because the alternative was worse. Those who didn't were taken below the church, to the chamber few ever saw and lived. They called it the room of purity. Stone walls, iron chains, a table scarred by time and tears. There was no fire there, only cold, and in that cold, the body broke long before the spirit did. The accused were stretched, questioned, and made to believe that pain could cleanse the devil from within. And when their cries reached the ceiling, Reinhardt would whisper, "The Lord hears you now." But not all who entered that room were sinners. Some were simply inconvenient. Among them was Elara, a young midwife known for her remedies and strange knowledge of herbs. Her hands had brought dozens of children into the world. Yet one winter, when a noble's wife died in childbirth, they said it was Elara's fault. They said she had cursed the womb. A rumor, a tragedy. That's all it took. They came for her at dawn. The soldiers tore through her home, overturning bowls of dried lavender, scattering scrolls of ancient remedies. In their eyes, every leaf, every book, every whispered knowledge was proof of witchcraft. They bound her hands and dragged her into the frost, through streets lined with eyes that dared not meet hers. By the time she reached the church steps, her fate was sealed. Reinhardt watched her kneel. "You meddle in creation," he said. "You pretend to heal, but only God decides who lives." Elara met his gaze, unshaken. "Then let him speak," she said quietly. "If I am guilty, let him strike me down." The words hung in the air, too bold, too calm. Reinhardt's jaw tightened. "He will," he replied, "through me." That night, the torches flickered lower than usual, as if even the flames hesitated. The townsfolk gathered in the square, their breath misting in the air like ghosts. Children clung to their mothers' skirts, afraid to look, more afraid not to. The air smelled of smoke and wet stone. They brought Elara to the platform, bound to the stake. She did not scream. She did not beg, and that frightened them more than any curse. The Inquisitor raised his voice. "This is not cruelty," he proclaimed. "This is mercy. For through pain, the soul finds its way back to the light." The crowd murmured a prayer, or perhaps an apology. The torchbearer stepped forward. But before the flames rose, the wind began to howl, sudden, sharp, violent. The clouds split, and rain began to fall in sheets, dousing the torches. The people gasped, crossing themselves. "A sign," someone whispered. "The Lord rejects the burning." Reinhardt's face hardened. "No," he said through gritted teeth. "It is the devil's trick." He ordered the guard to take her below instead, to the room of purity. The execution would wait until dawn. That night, the chamber echoed with the sound of dripping water and quiet prayers. Reinhardt circled Elara like a hawk around prey, holding a candle that flickered against the damp walls. "You could end this," he said softly. "Confess that you serve darkness." Elara looked at him, eyes hollow but unbroken. "You mistake knowledge for darkness," she whispered, "and ignorance for faith." Something inside him snapped. He slammed the book onto the table. "Enough!" His voice reverberated like thunder. "Your tongue speaks lies, but your eyes, they betray pride." He turned to his assistants. "Cleanse her." The word hung in the air, heavier than any blade. Elara closed her eyes. Her lips moved. A prayer, perhaps? Or a curse? No one could tell. The candlelight trembled. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled like an answer. Hours passed. When Reinhardt finally emerged, his face was pale, his hands trembling slightly, though he would never admit why. The townsfolk saw him cross the square before dawn, eyes sunken, muttering prayers to himself. And behind him, the church bell tolled 3 times, though no one had touched the rope. By sunrise, the rain had stopped. The air was still, too still. The townspeople gathered again, waiting to see the witch burn. But when the guard went below, the chamber was empty. The chains lay open. The door still locked from the outside. They searched the entire church, from altar to cellar. Nothing. Reinhardt swore she was gone, vanished. But others said something else. That when they entered the chamber, the walls were warm, as if touched by fire from within. And on the stone table, burned into the surface, were 2 words written in ash. "He knows." From that day forward, the Inquisitor changed. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. He claimed he could hear her voice in the walls, whispering prayers he could not understand. The more he prayed, the louder they grew, until one night he set fire to the church himself, screaming that the devil lived inside its stones. They found him at dawn, kneeling in the ashes, eyes open but unseeing. No one spoke of Elara again, but the town never recovered. Fields withered, wells dried. Mothers still whispered her name when their children were sick, not as a curse, but as a plea. And so, the story of Dornheim became legend, the town that tried to burn a witch and instead burned its soul. But legends have roots, and sometimes those roots dig deep, because years later, in another town, another inquisitor claimed he'd heard her voice too, calling from the smoke of his own pyres. And that was when the church began to wonder, had they been hunting witches, or had they been creating them? When the smoke of Dornheim finally cleared, no one spoke of witches for a season. The fields lay black, the church reduced to a skeleton of stone. Yet silence never lasts long in a frightened world. Fear is a seed. It waits buried until the next storm wakes it. That storm came 20 years later. Across the Rhine, in a city called Falkenstadt, a new inquisitor arrived. His name was Father Matthias Keller, a man who had studied under the very priests who once served Reinhardt. They whispered that he kept a fragment of Dornheim's scorched altar in a silver box around his neck, a reminder of what happens when mercy fails. But others said the box wasn't a relic at all, that if you press your ear to it, you could hear a woman's voice whispering prayers in a language no one knew. Matthias was not a monster by birth. He was a scholar, a man of reason, or so he believed. Yet every book he read told the same story. That sin was clever, that the devil hid behind gentle faces. The old world feared armies and famine. The new world feared thought. And so the fires began again, the return of the trials. In 1506, the Bishop of Mainz issued a decree, let no suspicion of witchcraft go unexamined. That single sentence turned neighbors into informants, mothers into accusers, and priests into judges. Falkenstadt, once known for its libraries, became a factory of confessions. Every dawn the bell tolled, not for mass, but for judgment. The square filled with citizens clutching rosaries, pretending that participation was piety, not fear. Father Matthias presided over them all, his voice calm, his sermons colder than snow. Where light is bright, he would say, the shadows are darker, and only through pain does truth reveal itself. They believed him. Why wouldn't they? He spoke with the authority of a church, and the certainty of a man who had seen Dornheim burn. But there was one person who did not believe. Her name was Lisbeth, a novice scribe working in the monastery archives. She had come to Falkenstadt to copy holy texts, yet found herself cataloging trial records instead. scrolls filled with names, signatures, and the same desperate words over and over again, I confess. She noticed something no one else dared to see. The handwriting on many confessions looked identical. The same elegant curve of the letters, the same ink, the same trembling line. Someone was writing them before the accused even spoke. And among the signatures, one appeared again and again, Reinhardt, the dead Inquisitor of Dornheim. At first, she thought it coincidence. But then one night, while working late in the candlelit archives, she heard footsteps, soft, deliberate. When she turned, there was no one, only the faint scent of smoke, and a single parchment that hadn't been there before. On it were words written in fresh ink. He knows. Lisbeth dropped the page. Her heart pounded, echoing through the stone chamber. She ran to Father Matthias, clutching the parchment, her voice shaking. Someone is mocking the church, she said, using the name of a dead man. Matthias studied the page in silence. The candlelight danced in his eyes. When he finally spoke, his tone was soft, almost sorrowful. Blasphemy, he whispered. And you, child, were the only one in the room when it appeared. Lisbeth froze. You think, But he had already called for guards. That night, the city learned that evil could take the form of a scribe. The Whispering Chamber, the dungeon beneath Falkenstadt's monastery, was older than the church above it. Its walls were slick with moisture, its corridors narrow as veins. They said the stones remembered everything. The prayers, the screams, the lies. Matthias visited her there, holding a lantern. The devil is cunning, he said. He tempts even the purest hearts. But we can free you. I'm not possessed, Lisbeth pleaded. Someone forged those words. Then who? His voice rose, the echo returning twice as loud. A ghost. She hesitated, because that was exactly what she feared. He leaned closer. Confess and you'll see the dawn. Deny it and you'll feed the fire. Outside, rain hammered the stone roof like fists. Lisbeth did not confess. She prayed instead, for herself, and for the man who could no longer tell faith from fever. By morning, a guard opened the cell door to bring food, and found it empty. The chains lay on the floor, broken. The torch burned low, but its flame bent backward, as if pulled towards something unseen. On the wall, carved into the stone by a trembling hand, were 3 words. She is free. The guard fled. Within hours, the entire city was whispering that another witch had vanished, just as in Dornheim. Matthias tried to quell the panic with sermons, but his own voice began to falter. At night, he dreamed of Elara, the woman Reinhardt had failed to burn. He saw her eyes in every shadow, her voice beneath every hymn. He began to record his thoughts in a journal, convinced he was chronicling a divine battle. Each entry grew stranger than the last. March 3rd, I hear her in the bell tower. She speaks through the wind. March 8th, the smoke that rises from the pyres forms her face. March 12th, Reinhardt was right. Fire cannot cleanse what is already holy. By summer, more than 30 people have been executed. Yet the city's crops failed, the wells soured, and children were born still and silent. The people began to wonder. If the witches were gone, why did the curse remain? They turned their eyes toward Matthias. The hunter becomes the hunted. One night, as the Inquisitor led a procession through the square, a gust of wind snuffed every torch at once. Darkness swallowed the crowd. Then came the sound, a woman's voice singing, soft and low, an old lullaby no one had heard in decades. When the torches flared back to life, Matthias was gone. They found him at dawn on the hill outside the city, kneeling before a smoldering oak tree. The tree had been struck by lightning. Its bark burned into strange spiral patterns. At its base lay the silver box he always carried. Open, empty. In his journal, the last entry read, "The voice is not hell, but of heaven scorned. We hunted angels and called them witches." The bishop ordered the record sealed, the journal destroyed, and Matthias's name struck from every document. But secrets have a way of surviving paper and fire alike. His words traveled, copied by monks who feared but believed. And soon, they reached lands far beyond Falkenstadt. the contagion of fear. From France to Scotland, which trials multiplied like a sickness, the Malleus Maleficarum, the hammer of witches, became scripture. Its pages quoted Reinhardt's logic, Matthias's confessions, and the same unholy certainty that pain could purify. But there were always witnesses. Priests who heard whispers in the smoke. Scribes who found words appearing on blank pages. Soldiers who claimed that, as the flames rose, faces appeared inside them. Faces of women who did not scream, only stare back. A pattern emerged. Wherever the fire burned brightest, storms followed. Thunder that split towers, rain that drowned crops, hail that shattered windows. Villagers began to say that the sky itself rebelled. By the mid-1500s, entire regions were haunted by silence. People feared to speak the word, which, not out of piety, but because they feared she would hear. The scholar. A century after Dornheim, in 1588, a Jesuit scholar named Thomas Gruber found a copy of Matthias's journal hidden inside a monastery wall. He read it in secret, convinced it held clues to ending the hysteria. But what he found disturbed him more than he expected. The entries ended in Latin prayers, but between the lines, written in faded ink, were phrases that seemed to answer prayers, as if two hands had shared the same page centuries apart. Deliver us from evil. Evil is ignorance. Forgive us our trespasses. You burn forgiveness. The handwriting was feminine, elegant. The same script Lisbeth used in the archives of Falkenstadt. Gruber spent the next decade tracing her story, traveling through ruins and burned villages. Everywhere he went, he found the same mark etched into stone, sometimes in ash, sometimes in blood, a spiral of flame turning inward. Locals called it the sign of the redeemed. He began to believe that Elara, Lisbeth, and countless others were connected, souls bound by injustice, appearing wherever persecution burned hottest. To him, they weren't witches. They were the echoes of truth itself, demanding to be heard. But the church called his theory heresy. They silenced him. His final manuscript ended mid-sentence. If the flame speaks, listen, because what we call damnation may yet be. The page was torn there. The legacy of smoke. By the dawn of the 17th century, the witch hunts reached their peak. Tens of thousands were accused, tortured, and executed. Yet the more they burned, the less they believed. Even priests began to whisper doubts. During the Great Storm of 1603, lightning struck the Cathedral of Würzburg, igniting the bell tower. Witnesses swore the flames did not consume. It shaped itself into the figure of a woman, standing tall above the city, her arms open as if in benediction. The storm ceased instantly. The tower collapsed, but the statue of Mary beside it remained untouched. From that day, no witch was ever burned in Würzburg again. Scholars later dismissed the story as myth, but travelers still spoke of the scent of lavender lingering in the ruins, and of voices in the rain reciting forgotten prayers. The reckoning. Centuries passed. Empires rose, science bloomed, and the age of reason dawned. People laughed at the thought of witches, called them superstition, nightmares of an ignorant time. Yet in small villages where ruins still stand, candles sometimes flicker without wind, and children wake crying from dreams of fire that does not burn. In the archives of the Vatican, there remains a sealed box labeled Dornheim 1486. Inside, according to rumor, lies a single sheet of parchment, its ink neither faded nor dry, its words written in a hand no scholar can trace. It reads, "He knows, she remembers, and now so do you." And that is how the legend of Dornheim ends, or begins again, each time someone dares to speak her name. Because in the end, history does not forget. It waits. It listens. And sometimes when the wind shifts and the smoke drifts low, it whispers back,